Hi, thank you for joining me today as I talk about enterprise software as a service using Drupal, what that is, why it might matter, and how to get started, particularly if you're a government organization. A little bit about myself before we get started. My name is Kendra. I work for the state of Georgia on our digital services team. So I'm the director of product at GeorgiaGov Interactive. We're sort of the digital services arm within the state's technology authority. And what I do there is I manage our roadmap for our enterprise Drupal platform, content management system. So that means that I keep the pulse on the whole system. I plan out maintenance and enhancements, training and support, etc. More importantly, that means that it's my job to make sure that the content management system we provide meets the needs of our agencies and their constituents. Previously, within this team, I've done front-end development, design, testing, customer support, training, account management, and governance for our platform. So that means that I'm able to have a pretty good idea of how all these pieces come together. My goal today is to shine some light on how we handle our Drupal websites within the state, and to give you some food for thought on how that may apply to your organizations. I know that when we talk about government, there's so many different versions of that. We've got federal, state, local. We have agencies that are handling their group of sites, and then on the enterprise level, we're thinking of all of the sites within a state or all of the sites within a local government. At federal, we usually go to each agency, each group has many sites around it. But I want to try to provide a way for each of you to think of how you might fit within a larger landscape of websites. I'm going to try to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time, so I'm going to be hitting on a lot of topics that can be dug into a lot more in detail. I'd be happy to dig in more at length at a later time if any of you are interested and want to reach out. So let's get started. So the state of Georgia has an enterprise SaaS, enterprise software as a service model for state agencies. What does that even mean? We've actually had an enterprise web solution since 2001. It was on a completely different CMS system, but that means that we've been providing a sort of software that provides web management for a multitude of agencies for a very long time. It's been a Drupal-based solution since we migrated it over in 2012. We have a Drupal multi-site environment, and that we offer that to our state agencies. And it's a proven model that's worked. As I said, we've started in 2001, which means that we've been able to iterate and expand on this model a lot since its inception and learn and grow with it as we've moved and as our agencies have matured. So, but again, when I say we have enterprise SaaS, what do we think about? Well, first I want to give you an illustration. Think back to the internet 20 years ago, and we had HTML. We started with static HTML pages, and GeoCities came along to provide a way for anyone to build their own little bit of cyber real estate if they had a bit of bravery to learn the markup. But it was the Wild West, right? Anything goes. And also anyone who wanted a little bit of space would have to learn how to maintain it or let it languish, right? And that's how we have amazing sites like this one that also didn't change since the moment they were set up and some pages were added to it, 20 plus years ago. So the next, we had MySpace. MySpace sort of swooped in as the next piece of that puzzle. It said, hey, learning all this HTML is overwhelming. Not everyone can handle that. We're going to give everyone a space online, but we're going to help them manage that content. But it was still sort of the Wild West for the look, right? Like you had a lot of customization and control over what those pages looked like. And so we had a lot of pages that looked just like this. So then in moved Facebook. And Facebook said, all right, we know that you need your space online. We're going to provide that space and this way to connect with others and show your personality. And yet we will not let you change the colors or the layout or the formatting of anything on the page, but we still want to let your personality shine through. So we're able to continue to grow and change and iterate the platform, right? Like the overall pieces and what happens, but we're not going to let you change your background color or pick a different font. Amazingly, even though Facebook has been so structured and so close-knit over what they'll allow, this is growing and growing, right? People get mad when Facebook changes something and moves the menu from the left to the right or something else, and they all get upset about it, and then 2 days later they've forgotten that anything ever changed and they've moved on with, using Facebook in its new version. So if we look at this on a continuum of the way that personal spaces online have grown over time, on the far left we have the DIY websites. That's sort of the GeoCities model, where you've got hosting, but you have to control all the code. You have to maintain every piece of it. It requires more expertise and maintenance, but you have full control over every little piece of it. On the far right, you have the full structured platform version, right? That's the Facebook version. It requires way less expertise and maintenance. My mom feels comfortable using Facebook, but it also really limits what you can do with it. You can put whatever you want into the blocks of content. You can add the images, the videos, the text that you want, but the look and feel you have zero control over. And then somewhere in the middle is the platform DIY, where you've got areas that you can control, but you also you can control some of the look and feel, but it's not fully Wild West. There's still some maintenance there. So towards the left, you have more flexibility, but it's harder to sustain in the long run. And that's where we see things that were built 20 years ago aren't regularly grown and maintained and taken care of. On the right, you have a less flexible model, but it's staffed to improve, and so it continues to grow and change over time. So when we start thinking of websites, the type that we're building for state government, we can kind of go through a similar continuum, right? On the left, you have your DIY flat websites, your HTML and CSS maintained maybe in Dreamweaver type websites. We still have some of those within the state too. And then as you keep going, you can also have states do the roll your own server-side site, so where they kind of build out their own database, MySQL, code type systems, but they're still controlling all the pieces of it, even though it's pulling from a database. You can do a DIY CMS. You can stand up your own version of Drupal for this one site, or spin up your own WordPress site for this one agency site, but it still requires that team to do the regular maintenance and updates and code fixes to it. And so this is where we get off to the right, where you have the platform as a service sort of enterprise CMS model, where a lot of things are managed, but not everything is managed. And then the far right is our software as a service. That's where we think of it as the Squarespace for government. So your enterprise CMS, everything is managed, or most of it's managed off to the right. So again, that requires less expertise and maintenance for the agencies. All of that update of maintenance is centrally managed, but you're going to have to give a little bit with that. You don't get the tight control over every little piece of it either. So again, on the right, that's less flexible, but it's staffed to improve. Off to the left, it's way more flexible. The sky's the limit, but it is harder to sustain that and keep it up, and more expensive too. Either more expensive, or it just sort of goes off into the nether. So why do we stay there on that managed side of the spectrum? Well, think of it, right? As you know, maintaining website services require a lot of resources and expertise. So when you're building out any one of these versions, you're going to need to think about the code and the design. You've got to have the content in there. There's your hosting, your regular maintenance, your security, especially if you're government, support for that, and the strategy of how to grow it and enhance it over time. In a traditional model, each agency has its own individual IT or web department to support this website, or they have to hire an external vendor to build and maintain it for them. In each of these models, though, the content is really the only area where the agency is a subject matter expert, right? Most state agencies, most government agencies are not experts over all of the web resources. They're experts over the content, the information that they manage. So this becomes a huge duplication of effort when it's spread across each agency. So think of doing this 150 times across all these agencies, and it's a waste of money over this scale. IT is not most agencies' expertise, so the strategy and usability in particular often take a back burner in this scenario, and then the constituents really lose out. So this is where we come in. By consolidating the IT technology and skill sets into a central platform, we're able to realize cost savings by meeting those shared needs, centralizing the governance and best practices, right? That strategy piece that gets forgotten otherwise, and then allowing the agencies to focus on their area of expertise, their content. So we maintain the code and the design, they maintain the information for their individual sites. Because I'm talking to a Drupal group, I'll get you a little more detail into how our platform is set up in case that's helpful. So we maintain an enterprise web CMS based on open source Drupal 7. As the Drupal clan knows, that's a highly flexible and highly customizable tool, but it isn't very useful out of the box, right? That requires a lot of customization. So on top of that, we have our open public distribution. We used a very old beta version when we stood this up 6 years ago. So current open public is a little more mature than the version that we sort of got stuck with and weren't able to grow on a whole lot 6 years ago. But so on top of that, when we built this out originally, we built it out with a lot of our own custom code. In part, that was to meet the needs of our agencies that we were migrating off of another system that already had a lot of content. And over time, we've just grown and added on custom code as agencies come in that need new functionality. On top of that, we've got our base theme. We use Omega as our base theme. And then we have 13 different themes that are layered on top of that. But really for those themes, it's just colors and fonts. So back when we started, we didn't have an option of a color picker to let agencies pick their own colors. So every look, every color and font layout had to be its own theme. And then on top of that, we've got about 76 sites all together where each agency maintains its own content on its own database. As far as who owns each piece of this, the agency customers own their content. The open source community really owns and maintains that bottom layer, the Drupal 7 core and distribution section. And then that center area is where our team is able to have its sphere of influence. So that's our custom code and our themes. And that's where we focus our areas on improvement. So we've identified the key needs, content types, branding, and display functionality that are shared across agencies, and we provide for those needs. And then, of course, improvements to one page type benefits every page across the platform that uses that page type. Improvements to a theme benefits all the sites that use that theme. So this model really speeds innovation across the enterprise because we can prioritize an enhancement roadmap and we can do things once that serves all of our customers. Some of our more recent initiatives over the years have included converting all of our themes to mobile-friendly, responsive layouts. So we had 76 sites that were not mobile-friendly, and we updated all of those themes and code, and were able to provide responsive layouts for everybody very quickly. We went through an accessibility enhancement sprint that improved the accessibility to meet WCAG 2.0 level 2A standards for the code and the themes across all of our sites. And then we've been working on optimizing performance, compressing background images and making some other changes to optimize our code. And then we've also switched over to all SSL websites, so we're also enhancing the security. Cloud hosting and open source solutions can take that another step further, right? Because it furthers our cost savings. We're tapping into community expertise, and it allows us to react more quickly to security risks and changes in technology and innovation. We don't have to have a team of experts managing everything. We're focused on scale and shared expertise in both the hardware and the software. But here's a key thing to keep in mind with this centralized model. So our team actually has a lot of our development outsourced to external vendors, but we do not outsource our strategy or our planning to a vendor. So our team does not, because we're part of the state, we do not have to focus on a bottom line of making money. Our motivating factor is serving our agencies and, most importantly, all Georgians. We don't have to say yes to every expensive, outlandish request just to make money. We're able to really think about how we can champion our visitors. So while we have outsourced hosting and while we have outsourced development, we have not outsourced strategy, we have not outsourced planning. That's part of what our team does, is maintain that roadmap to make sure that we're citizen focused at all times. So that's what a SaaS is, and that's why you might use it. But next, I want to talk about how you can maintain that enterprise strategy. The enterprise strategy is really realizing that you can't, nor should you, build everything that comes around. This may be obvious, but it means that planning a way forward while keeping in mind how that will impact multiple agencies at multiple levels. You need a framework around how you prioritize that roadmap because you know you can't do everything. So when we're looking at all the different things that we could be doing and thinking about which ones to focus our time and resources on, the metrics that I use are really looking at how each optional priority can impact our users and our agencies, right? If we're not helping the end users or our agencies, then we're doing something wrong. Looking at to whether it's future focused and whether what we're doing is providing the best value for the time spent. So when I'm thinking about something like the accessibility enhancements, we asked all those questions, right? Does improving accessibility for the platform benefit the end users? Absolutely it does. In fact, I argue that not only does improving accessibility help users with visible or obvious disabilities, but it also helps every user. If I'm making something more usable for someone with that has challenges, I'm making it more usable for everybody. So accessibility absolutely helps all users. Is it helping our agency partners? Again, I would argue that we are, because anything that helps our end users helps our agencies. But also if we're thinking of accessibility and improving that, we're helping to mitigate the risks of getting sued. So that's another place where we're helping our agency partners. Is it future focused? Why, yes. The government's about to require WCAG 2.0 Level 2A standards for websites. We've already met that standard, so we knew this was coming and prepared for it ahead of time. And then does it provide the best value? We were able to do a lot of this with our in-house staff and partnering with other agencies. So we were able to, and because it's a platform, we're able to pass these improvements across many agencies at once. And so the time spent was really worth it for the amount of value that we got out of that. Now, if you compare this to a performance upgrade, it looks a little different, right? We're still helping the end users because all of us know how painful it is to wait for a page to load. But our agency partners don't care that much if a page loads more quickly, so they don't feel that value. Is it future focused? Again, I would argue it is. Others would argue that, well, you've got speeds running more quickly, our internet runs more quickly, so we don't need it. I would argue more people are relying on data plans, so it's future focused in that way. Right, and then again, does it provide best value? All of the changes we've been making are in-house, so that time spent isn't as expensive compared to the lift and the value that we're providing for it. The important thing to remember, though, with each of these is that as we complete these initiatives, that impacts our long-term strategy. So we have to build all of these principles into our future development as well. So when you look at what we've done on our platform for the last few years, we started out with our platform design and launching in 2011 and 2012, and then we just did some smaller sprints of module development and hitting that stable state and fixing bugs. Once we were at that stable state, we were able to focus on our mobile-friendly initiative. Once we completed that, we moved on to the accessibility and performance initiatives. And once those were completed, we need to make sure that we build each of those into everything that we build from now on. Believe it or not, these require intentionality at every stage. At the requirement stage for everything new that we build, the design stage for everything new, the development stage, testing, and content stages. So building responsive code, building responsive features still isn't always part of a default mindset, right? If we don't keep on, thinking about this at every step of our development requirements, they can be forgotten. So responsive design, accessibility, performance, and security are guidelines that we've baked into every step of our sprints and every step of our roadmap to make sure that they don't get lost along the way. So that's the first part of our strategy talk, right, of what we're planning. But the next step is remembering that, again, when we get to enterprise, there's limitations too. So when we share a code base, all of those updates have implications across all sites, and that means that individual agencies do have to give up some autonomy to reap the benefits of a platform. To quote Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, with enterprise software, you can't always get what you want. Sometimes we have to say no to feature requests that would be a huge lift for minimum benefit. But we trade off our momentary whims and fancies in exchange for making sure the audience has what it needs to access key information and services. So yeah, talking points with enterprise software, you are going to have limitations. It's easier to meet those shared needs, the 80% of needs that all of our agencies have, and harder to meet the individual needs, that 20% where one agency needs this and two agencies need that, but not everybody needs it. Our code principles also have to be enforced to sustain them, so that requires work. And small changes may have unintended consequences across the broad platform, and so testing becomes essential. In this case, it's important for us to approach our enhancements with a problem-first mindset, not solution-first. We have to seek solutions to agency problems, not what module does this, but what's the best way to meet this goal. So what do I mean by that? Where is the difference between problem first and solution first? Well, a lot of times we have agencies that come to us and ask for solutions. They come and say, you know, hey, we need an automated last edited timestamp on every page of our site. That's asking for a solution. But if we take a step back and we say, hey, okay, I hear that you are asking for a last edited timestamp, a little italic bit of text at the bottom of every page that tells you when it was last edited. But tell me the problem again. Tell me why you need this. Well, what we found out was our agencies said they had a handful of pages that specific subgroups of people were looking to, and they need to know when those few pages have been revised. They've given me a platform solution, right? I need this automated little bit of text at the bottom of every page on our site, and that probably means other agencies are going to ask for it at the bottom of every page of their site. But their solution is, the reason that they need it is there's a few pages that a few people need. So they're asking for a very expensive, very time-intensive solution to a pretty easy to achieve manual solution. What we recommended in this case was honestly type in on those few pages, type in your last edited date and italicize it. There's a lot of reasons why we want you to do that manually on those few pages. One being, if it's across all of your pages, now we have a lot of questions, right? What if you just went in to fix a typo? Do you want it to show it was last edited when you just fixed a typo? What about all those pages that haven't been touched in 5 years? Do you really want to broadcast that you haven't touched those pages in 5 years? What if someone just goes in to look at it and they save it and it shows last edited today when actually it hasn't been edited for 2 years? So suddenly you need toggles, you need different ways to approach this when all they really need to do is type in a date on about 20 pages and remember to update those on those pages instead of adding extra steps and extra questions to everybody that uses the platform, right? So that's what I mean when I'm saying problem first. Focus on the problem and not just focus on meeting a solution that someone asks for. Another example is a lot of times we have agencies that come to us and say, I want to see all of your themes that I can choose from. Or even better, we need a brand new website redesign. But when we say, okay, let's talk, right? Why do you need a redesign? What's your problem? More than once when I've had someone come to me asking for a redesign, what we found that they mean is that they're overwhelmed by how much content they have outdated. Well, these teams are the ones that manage that content. They don't want a new color, right? They don't want a new theme. They want to do a content audit and a content cleanup. If we were just addressing sending them a list of all of our themes, we wouldn't be meeting them with the solution that they need, which is let's look through your content and figure out what you can clean up. And in many of those instances, because we've been problem first, we've been able to figure this out and provide them with content assistance instead of color assistance. The next piece of that then is our enterprise governance. So we can't nor should we, right, add every feature that every tenant requests, as we discovered, a moment ago when we're looking at our problem first. And this is also where governance comes in. So that's where we're figuring out what guardrails we need to put around our system from the beginning to keep it from becoming unwieldy. So we start with that user-first focus. We're building this for people who need access to government services. We're not building things to scratch the itch of a commissioner or an IT team. Depending on the size and the structure of your team, that will dictate how much flexibility you can offer in your governance model. What works for us may not be what's best for you. As I've been talking to different groups about how they handle their governance, I've seen these 3 basic models repeated a few different times. Again, for each of you, this might look a little bit different, but here's some basic ways to start thinking about how to govern an enterprise system. So you can think about handling it with central management and central development, central management but distributing your development, or distributing both your management and your development. On our first model here, our central management and central development, that's what our team does. We have tight governance up at the top. So we decide what gets developed, mobile first, accessibility, those were initiatives that we prioritized for the entire platform. And then we and our vendor partners do all of that development. Everything we build gets shared across all of those agencies, though sometimes we keep features disabled until requested, especially if we build something for one agency. If it doesn't seem like something that would immediately benefit everybody, we'll keep those modules disabled for most of the agencies until we find that somebody needs it. So that's our SaaS model, right? Our software as a service. Our code is maintained and our code is distributed from that central model out to everybody. Note that each version that I'm going to talk about considers a central hosting management system. So we've got our little cloud hosting layer here. Once your agencies are hosting their own content, you're just back to a normal open source distribution model. You're outside of these different management models. So in this central development, agencies can request new features, which they often do, but they may or may not be selected for development. So in the case of our agency that asked for a last edited date listed, they requested it, but we did not prioritize it. We didn't push it out. When our agency asks for a module that helps them with their newsletters, that plugs in with a third-party newsletter system, as long as it's secure, we vet that and we plug that in because that's something that we can prioritize a little bit more easily. So the request features may or may not get selected. Our next possible management model is that distributed development with central management. So in this case, you start with the same, right? Code is maintained and distributed. Agencies request features that may or may not be implemented. But also in this model, agencies can contribute features back. So GovCMS in Australia follows a model similar to this. They maintain everything, but if an agency wants something that central management isn't prepared to budget for or have the time for, that agency can decide to pay an outside vendor to build that feature and contribute it back to the platform. In that case, there does need to be some strict guidelines on what gets developed back. So right back to, if it needs to be responsive and accessible and performant, then those need to be guidelines of what will be accepted back into the platform. And so again, it requires some good communication to make sure that anything they're paying someone to build or that they're devoting their own resources to build is something that will be accepted back in and distributed out afterwards. And then our last model that we're going to look at is the platform as a service model. That's where your hosting is maintained in one place, but now you've distributed management on the same hosting. And that's more of your platform as a service. So you have a distribution that's built and maintained, but anyone can take that distribution and fork it, customize it, and maintain their own version of it. They can then also contribute their updates back to the core distribution, but aside from that, in a pass model, everyone maintains control of their own version. In this case, you've lost a lot of the benefits of central hosting, which is the central management, which is that speed of innovation for the whole, lower development costs. But this is helpful for those groups that really need unique snowflake treatment, and they need to control their experience just like they want it to be. So a quick look at them side by side. Central management with central development, everything is controlled from the top. The next version with distributed development allows for people to contribute back to that code base, that central code base. Or for those agencies that really are unique and need unique treatment, they can fork off and then maintain their own. GovCMS does pretty much all three of these models, or at least the two on the right. At GeorgiaGov Interactive, currently, we just handle that central management development, the one on the left. Whatever your model, the communication with your tenants really becomes key. So we have to keep a pulse on what they need and make sure that they know what we're doing. It's hard for some agencies to let go of full control. So if we keep communication with them, it lessens that pain of not fully knowing what's happening. So we do regular check-ins with our agencies. We ask them what they're looking at, and then we're able to find from there when there are shared needs. We can sort of build on those. So that's really what the quick big picture of what maintaining an enterprise SaaS looks like and all the different options behind it. Lastly, I want to talk at what we're looking ahead for as we start thinking about Drupal 8. So we've been on Drupal 7 for about 6 years now, and we are starting to feel the pain of being on an older platform that was built pretty rigidly. So as we think of what we're going to build out in the future, some of the things we're thinking about are making sure that we can provide options for more open partnerships and code ownership. So those last two governance models are really interesting to us, and we're exploring how we may be able to incorporate them in some ways while still, without letting everything kind of get so crazy that we can't maintain it anymore. But not everyone can or will host with us. So we have some agencies that are required to host on their own. So if we loosen our model, we can allow for more code sharing outside of that central model. And our themes have gotten too limited. Like I said, we have one base theme and everything's based on that. So we're looking to creating pattern libraries, doing a pattern lab, and creating more flexible layout and theme solutions in the future. We also know it's important to start thinking outside the browser. So if we're only developing with websites in mind, we won't meet our audience where they are. We need to be thinking about our holistic strategy. So mobile, but also conversational and chatbot functionality, using content APIs instead of content living only on one website. Or even worse, having different answers to the same question living in half a dozen different locations within agencies' disparate systems. We're looking to build an integrated digital ecosystem. So being able to have one sort of source of truth, one set of information that we can then share within agencies to make sure that everything is connected between all the different devices that people may have. Finally, as we look ahead to future goals, we want to collaborate more with all of you. Other states and other government entities have similar challenges and needs, so how can we all work together? I could talk about any piece of this all day. So if there's anything that struck a chord, let's chat, particularly if you want to find places where we can collaborate, or if you're working on your own sharing models. I would love to hear what's working for you and what's not. So connect with our team at GeorgiaGov team on Twitter. We have a lot of resources, including blogs and training materials and standards and governance on interactive.georgia.gov. So there's a lot of things there that may be helpful as you're planning out your own models. Or connect with me on Twitter at @Skeene and let me know you want to chat. All right, thanks so much.